Hello friends, welcome to Alive and Kicking. My name is Jordan and this is episode 1 of this show. I have had a lot of requests from people to do a podcast and a YouTube show, so here we go. I've had a lot of new followers lately that don't know who I am, so I figured this is a great opportunity to do a little quick background so you can get to know me and where I'm at on my journey and how I got to where I am, so that when you hear me talking about things like soul synchronization and simulator theory, and you're like, who's this guy? Well, maybe this will give you some context. It's kind of a fun little ride too. So let's go back 5 years. I'm going to skip through the first 40 years of my life because that is a whole other podcast. But the last 5 years has been really wild. This is the spiritual era of Jordan, you could say. I had a near-death experience 5 years ago, and after decades of abusing my body with alcohol and drugs, it had enough. I had felt like most of my life I was kind of a passenger in a runaway train headed for a cliff, and there was nothing I could do about it except just enjoy the ride. And I knew it was headed for this cliff, and lo and behold, the cliff came. I hit rock bottom, my organs started failing, I was bedridden, I couldn't move. I had convinced my wife I just had the flu because I didn't know what was going on. My body shut down. She was working, and after days of checking on me and me convincing her I had the flu and I'll be better tomorrow, don't worry, at a certain point she was like, oh my God, I don't know what's wrong with you, I have to take you to the hospital. So at this point, my consciousness had basically been sanitized out of my vessel, and it was kind of up in the corner of the room looking down, almost like a security camera. It even had the little fisheye perspective to it. It was really wild. So I watched all this happen from a third person point of view, and I watched myself laying in the bed dying. I watched her bust in the room, rush me to the hospital. Even when I was in the car, I wrote a book called Entrepreneurial Spirits where I talk about this, where my consciousness felt like it was a cape flapping in the wind behind the car. Like I was watching myself in the car, like a movie. And the whole thing was just third person. And I get to the hospital, and they have no good news for me. They're all telling me that I'm going to die. They had never seen like blood pressure and heart rate like this. They were giving me more sedatives than they'd ever pumped in anybody, and nothing was responding. They thought I was going to have a stroke or a heart attack. They couldn't get me under control. I'm just laying there, and everyone's telling me all these things, and I'm just laying there thinking, this is it. Like I didn't really have a lot of hope at that point. And it was a very dark and scary moment. Sarah's with me, my wife. She's amazing. She was by my side the entire time. And they admit me to the hospital. They finally get me, my vitals, to a semi-manageable point where they were happy enough to admit me. And then when I'm admitted, we come to find out through this process that I had been going through severe alcohol detox and withdrawals for days. That's what I was doing in my bed at home. I was just sweating and vomiting and just like I was shaking uncontrollably, and I was basically dying. My organs were all shutting down, all failing. I didn't eat for days. I didn't walk. I couldn't do anything. But I didn't know this, right? Like I didn't actually know what was happening. But they told me basically I went through the most severe alcohol withdrawals in my bed at home, which you shouldn't do because it's actually very, very lethal. A lot of things can go wrong. So when I get up to the room, they basically strap me in this bed. I got all these things, tubes and everything hooked into me. Can't really move. And they're worried about me having a seizure, and they're worried about all these things. But they were just pumping me full of drugs because they were just trying to get my body to calm down. And I was hallucinating and all sorts of stuff, and it was a weird night. But at a certain point in that night, everything changed. So there's this selfie that we took, me and Sarah. At a first point, I was like lucid enough to even be able to take a selfie in probably days of weeks. And we take this terrible picture, meaning that I'm just whacked out looking. But we're just taking a picture of ourselves, just smiling, because we're like, okay, we're here. Like my vitals and stuff are to the point where they don't think I'm going to stroke out right now. So we can kind of breathe a little bit, a sigh of relief. And we take this picture. And there's this right off to the corner, there's this blue light that's coming in, and it's a bright blue light and like an orb. It doesn't really make any sense because it's not casting any shadows. There's no, like, it's not like light from the medical equipment or anything. There's no lights over there. We have all these pictures of the room and of us and stuff, and there's nothing like it. It's just in this one picture at this one time. And it's really profound because at that moment, everything changed with me mentally. I went from thinking I'm going to die, this is it, sad, terrified, to I immediately told all the nurses, I was like, hey, I got to go home. And they're like, haha, they're all funny. They're like, you're not going, you can't walk. We put so much drugs in you, it could kill a horse. You're in terrible shape. Your organs, your liver, your kidney. I had severe pancreatitis for about 2 years leading into this, where my pain level was at about a 10 day in, day out. All my organs were shot. Nothing was working. I couldn't walk, and I hadn't eaten in days. And they're like, you can't go home. You're insane. And I was just like, no, seriously, I got to go home. I appreciate y'all. I'm forever, eternally grateful for y'all saving my life, but I have to go home. I have to heal. They're like, you are healing. And I was like, no, I can't heal here in hospital. I have to heal at home. And, there was this one particular male nurse that was very tough love. And he would just come and sit down. He'd be like, you know what? You did this to yourself and you're going to die. I'm like, thanks, man. Where's the girl nurse? So that's what I was dealing with. But I was just like, I have to go home. I have to get out of here. So I summoned a meeting with the head doctor, of that level. And come to find out, the ICU part I was in, they kind of treat it like an alcohol detox. I live at the beach, and apparently a lot of people do this, and it's like a revolving door. He'll patch them up, and they come back the next week, and they're very frustrated with alcohol and with, the way that alcoholics, I guess, kind of abuse the system and just kind of go in there and get help. So they weren't real overly compassionate with me, because they didn't know if I was just going to be another one of these Joe Schmoes that's back in there the next week. So I was telling them, I was like, hey, I will make you proud. I promise I'm going to turn my life around. Everything's going to change. I just need to get out of here. And finally, after a bunch of convincing, they made me sign a bunch of papers and let me go. I couldn't walk. I couldn't stand. I couldn't do anything. But they wheeled me out of there, and I went home. I just knew after that moment that everything was going to be okay. Before that, I was like, this might be it. My whole life, I was kind of programming myself to think, I didn't think I'd make it to 20. Then when I made it 20, I was like, okay, I'm definitely not making it 30. Then when I made it 30, I was like, well, 40, definitely not. And here I am. I was 39 years old. And I was like, okay, this is it. But something hit me in that room that night. And it was like, no, you got to get home. You got to heal, because you got work to do. And so that was my mission. So I go home. My body's broken. I'm in terrible, terrible shape. Severe pancreatitis. My liver and kidney function are non-existent. My blood pressure is so high. I went to the doctor a few days after getting out, and she made me lay down immediately after she took my blood pressure. She said, you're 200 over 100 blood pressure. She's like, you might stroke out right here. She's like, if you sneeze, you're dead. And I'm just like, I literally felt like a bomb about to go off at any moment, constantly. There was no stopping it. So it wasn't good. They were giving me all sorts of medicines for my blood pressure. Nothing was working. I was getting very frustrated and very hopeless. At the same time as all this, I look in the mirror, and for the first time in my life, the thing looking back at me, I'm like, that's not me. I just had this, oh my God, what am I? I started thinking about mortality and my death, and what happens when I die? Do I just dissolve and I don't exist? What about my kids? And, all this life was for nothing. And I go into this terrible dark night of the soul, period. And start trying to research and find answers. What is the purpose of life? What happens when we die? Why are we here? And all the stuff I keep finding was just reinforcing these negative, kind of thoughts that I was having. And it really sent me in this kind of hopeless downward spiral of oh my God, I could die any moment. And what was the point of all this? And where do I go when I die? And so I was at this point, right, where I'm just trying to make sense of everything while trying to heal my body. And I was doing a lot of thinking about everything, and I was doing a lot of soul searching. And that moment looking in the mirror, whenever I knew the thing looking back at me wasn't really me. I knew it was a format of me, but it wasn't really me. I started thinking, okay, then what really am I? And I started getting these three main questions. I just call them the three big questions. It was, who am I? Where am I? And why am I? And I was just I have to find the answers to these. I just have to. So I was in the middle of this crazy Kundalini initiation type spiritual awakening, right? Where you kind of have to have this death and rebirth. So I'm rebirthing at this point, but I'm I have no idea what's going on. I'd come from a very atheistic, materialistic mindset, was not religious, was not spiritual, basically thought there was nothing beyond human life. You die and you're done. And all of a sudden I'm thinking, no, there has to be more. So at the same time, my body's broken and I'm in terrible shape, and I have to, like, I'm all like inspired spiritually and mentally, like, okay, I gotta find these answers. But then I'm also like, I can barely walk, I can't function, like my body's like breaking down on me. So my doctor was telling me I have to start, because the medicines weren't working. None of the blood pressure medicines were working. So she's like, okay, Transcendental Meditation is something that the American Heart Association endorses, so why don't you look into that? So I did. Didn't like it. Thought it was a pyramid scheme. It's very weird the way it's set up. Not a big fan. Even when I was able to get my hand on some meditations, I wasn't a fan of it. I was very hyperactive, so I was like, this isn't for me. So I started searching. Okay, what do hyperactive people do? Like, what do people like me do to meditate? And I came across this article, and it blew my mind. It was talking about this stuff called hemi-sync sound technology from the Monroe Institute, and they were studying, they put a lifelong Buddhist monk into an MRI with somebody that was just a Monroe person who's doing hemi-sync, and they had both of them get into a meditative state, one using the hemi-sync technology, and then the Buddhist monk being a Buddhist monk. Hey, you've been training your whole life for this. They live in a meditative state essentially. So the monk was quoted, this is in the New York Times afterwards, as saying, "It takes me decades and decades of focused intention and hardcore training to essentially get to the same meditative state that the hemi-sync sound technology can get a normal person in minutes, non-invasively, just listening to tones in your ears." And this blew my mind. I was like, okay, there is hope for me, because I didn't have years to dedicate to this. I had to fix some things fast. First thing I had to fix was my blood pressure and my heart rate, because my doctor was like, you can't even, like, when I went in, she's like, I have like 5 pages of stuff here to go over with you, and she's like, but we can't even get past page 1, because if you don't fix these things, you're dead. So I was like, okay, so this is urgent. So I find the tapes. This is 2020, so I wanted to go to the Monroe Institute, but they were closed. It's a pandemic at this point. So I was like, okay, I went on the internet and I found a bunch of the dark corners of the internet, some old tapes, and downloaded them, some old worksheets from the old Monroe Institute, and I started pouring myself into this. Okay, maybe this will help. So I started doing the meditations, the hemi-sync meditations. It's a binaural beat. Basically the way it works is that they put one tone in one ear, one tone in the other ear, your brain splits the difference. So say they put 100 hertz in one ear, 108 hertz in the other ear, your brain splits it, and you resonate at a 8 hertz state. So basically what happens is you're able to harmonize your brainwave state to these low hertz signals that aren't audible, so they can't just play, like, say, a 4 hertz in your ear, because your brain wouldn't even hear it, right? But if they do 101 and 104 in the other, then your brain harmonizes at 4, and you have 2 hemispheres, left and right hemisphere of your brain. That's why they call it hemi-sync, because it synchronizes the 2 hemispheres of your brain. It brings it in balance, and this, like, it's called resonant tuning, and it turns you into this just vibratory instrument, and it's made to allow your body to transcend to altered states of consciousness. But I didn't know this, so I was just like, okay, it can help me meditate, yay. So I started doing it religiously, and it gets me in this meditative state, because immediately it can get you into, say, theta brainwave state, like that, which is like the mind awake, body asleep, where your body's basically blissed out and almost like asleep, but your mind is still lucid, so you can do things, you can explore in astral realms and stuff. But at the time, I just wanted to meditate, and this was a hack, because all I had to do was listen. I just put the headphones in, close my eyes, and I'm in a meditative state. So I was like, yay, this is what I need. And my heart rate starts coming down, my blood pressure starts coming down. It resets my central nervous system and puts me back in control of my vessel, which was my main objective. So I was like, yay, this is amazing. But side effect, as I'm doing this on my couch every night and in the mornings and anytime I can, really, and I'm doing all sorts of other stuff too. I'm exercising, I'm dieting, I went full vegan, I did all the things, I'm sitting in a sauna every day, I'm drinking fresh turmeric out of the ground, I'm doing red light therapy, I'm doing breathing techniques, I'm doing all the things, right? Because I'm freaking out and I'm just trying to get everything under control. But nothing had an effect like hemi-sync. So as I'm doing this stuff, something crazy starts happening. I'm just doing these meditations, I don't even know anything exists out of this world, right? But at the same time, I'm reading Robert Monroe's books, and I'm kind of cracking open my perception of reality a little bit. And I start having these experiences. I start having these wild, I'm sitting down to meditate, next thing you know, I'm out of my body. Next thing you know, I'm in these different dimensions. I'm interacting with non-human intelligences. I'm having crazy experiences. I mean, like out of movies and stuff. And I would like come to, and I'd be like, what the hell was that? And I start to realize, oh, I'm using this stuff for meditation, but it's created as a technology to help you, explore different states of consciousness and different dimensions. And I was like, oh, wow, like I didn't really expect that going into all this, it was just kind of a fun little added bonus. So as I'm reading his books and I'm, doing all the gateway stuff, and I'm doing, the hemi-sync every night, and I'm having these experiences and my body is starting to heal, then I'm learning about things like patterning and, remote healing in your own body using like the energy bar tool and body mapping and all these techniques that Monroe Institute teaches you, especially old school stuff way back in the day. I'm doing all this old school stuff because the Institute's closed because of the pandemic, so I'm just hacking my way through using stuff I found on Reddit and all these weird places on the internet. So I'm just kind of figuring it out. And I'm doing all these crazy things, and I'm healing my body, and I'm doing this stuff. So I go back to the doctor about 3 months or so later. And the first time, right after the hospital when I went to the doctor, she was basically like, I don't know what to do. I think you're going to die. She kept telling me this stuff. Like I was scared to sneeze this whole time. I was like, what happens if I sneeze? Like I felt like a bomb about to explode. But I went back, and all of a sudden, like I'm calm. All right, like I've been monitoring. I bought a blood pressure monitor thing, and I was taking my blood pressure all the time, and I'm watching it come down and down and down, and my heart rate, I got my watch, and it's tracking my heart rate, and I'm like, okay, this is under control, my blood pressure is under control. At this point, I'd lost like 30 pounds or something. I was exercising every day, working out, eating right, doing all the things, so I was confident. But I went in there, and I was still expecting the results to be pretty bad because the first ones were so bad. I mean, my triglycerides, everything was so high that they didn't even know the triglycerides could go that high without killing the person. Like whenever they called me to tell me to come in to the doctor, she was basically telling me, she was like, we've never seen numbers like this bad. So anyways, when I came back for my follow-up, I was still expecting them to be bad because you don't go from that bad to good. But what happened is I went from that bad to great. Like my numbers were so good on my follow-up that my doctor started crying. She wasn't really the crying type. Like she was crying. We hugged. Who hugs their doctor while crying for good news? So it was wild. And my numbers were all like went from insanely bad, off the charts bad, to either completely normal or better than normal across the board, all of cholesterol and everything you can think of. So she's like, what did you do? And I was like, I didn't want to tell her all the crazy things I'd done. So I was just like, I meditated, doc, like you told me to. So she was really happy with me. I was happy. I had confidence. And now I could now that I knew my vessel was going to make it, I could focus more on all this other fun stuff that I'm learning, and these other, I don't know, like I had widened my aperture, right? So like say your aperture is the size of a tennis ball. That's what everything that you think about reality, yourself, everything fits in that. And then the more you do this, it's like working out. The more you do hemi-sync, meditation, exploring all these other realities and stuff, it starts to crack that open, widen your aperture. It starts widening your understanding of what's possible, your perception of reality. And, like building muscles when you're working out. Like every time you work out, your muscles get a little bigger, a little stronger. Every time you do these exercises and stuff, your aperture starts widening. Every time you have these experiences, more information's coming in of what's possible, what's out there. And it starts widening. So then it goes from like a baseball size to a basketball to a hula hoop to, the size of Earth. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't ever stretch back down. It always stretches out. So now my understanding of reality, of what's possible, of who I am, of what's out there, is just growing and growing and growing. And I start like mapping out the spirit world. I turn into like a crazy CSI person, where I have all these journals and stuff everywhere, and I'm just writing everything down and mapping out all my experiences. And okay, this place leads to this, and this is past this. And I literally created something called the Monroe map, which is a map of the spirit realms and the different, layers and everything to it as I'm exploring. And it was a lot of fun. So all these crazy things start happening. All these synchronicities start happening. People start coming in my life, giving me more information. Every time I hit a wall, I'll get a phone call or an email or something, and just give me the information I need to get past it. I'm like, oh, this is what I needed. Thanks. And like influential people start coming in my life. I'm like, how does this guy even know who I am? I won't name drop here, but like I started getting on podcasts, started having phone calls with people that I didn't have any prior connections with. People coming and visiting me at my town. So I was like, this is wild. So then, on one of our daily walks, me and Sarah walked by this place right by my house, and it was a yoga studio that went out of business. They had a for lease sign. And we were just like, why don't we take that place over? we didn't have any reason to or anything. We just did. And we created something called Alive and Kicking, which was a metaphysical meditation studio. I don't know where any of this came from, right? At this point, I've grown a beard, I've grown my hair out, I'm drinking juice, and I'm full-blown hippie at this point. I was none of those things before, okay? So this was all new. And I wasn't doing it on purpose, it was just happening. So we start this meditation studio, we start doing like these wild sound baths and astral projection classes and breathwork classes that are just, we were experimenting. It was like a laboratory for spiritual and conscious, exploring. And we were having the wildest experiences. I mean, completely shared experiences, out-of-body experiences, like otherworldly experiences, UFO experiences, all this stuff was happening. And so my aperture is just widening, and my perception is widening and widening, and we're having fun. We're basically engaging the phenomenon. We're basically just going hard into everything, just testing. What are we? What is this place? Like, what's out there? And it was a profound experience, and I wouldn't change it for the world, but it wasn't the best business experience. So we ended up closing the studio down at the end of the year. I took all that knowledge that I had gained, put it into my data set, and then I was like, okay, I totally went off the deep end of the woo-woo, right? And so I was like, but I'm a very analytical-minded person. So I'm like, all right, let's bring it back down to earth. I had to spend some time trying to scientifically justify and prove any of the stuff that was happening. And luckily I found a bunch of amazing, credible scientists that, like Robert Monroe, of course, Tom Campbell, physicist who helped Robert Monroe, who's just the most amazing person ever. Those two people were very influential. But then like Ishtok Bentov, oh my God, like his book changed my life. Then I started really investigating, because I had a near-death experience, and so I started investigating near-death experiences. And like Ibn Alexander, he wrote Proof of Heaven. Dr. Michael Newton, oh my God, his books will change your life forever. Ian Stevenson, all these people that were investigating near-death experiences in a credible way. These people are scientists and researchers, and Ibn Alexander is a neurosurgeon, and these people that were like backing up everything that I had experienced and justifying everything in a scientific, validating way. I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. So I was able to have that, year and a half or so of really engaging with the phenomenon in a spiritual way, and back that up with about a year of hardcore scientific investigation and research. And I was able to put all that together and say, okay, I have a model now of what this place is, of who we are, of how all this works. I was building something the whole time. And I call it simulator theory. And basically it goes kind of like this, that there's source. In an effort to get to know itself and to evolve, it created the universe, which is essentially like a self-development sandbox made of plasma. This basically material that is just unlimited potential energy. And source partitioned itself into pieces, which we call souls or spirits, and then those have experiences with themselves, and all those experiences create data. The data is sent back up to source. Source grows and evolves vicariously through all the experiences that happen in the universe. The universe evolves, so does source, and physical matter realities like Earth evolved out of that, because when you come into here, you now think that this is all there is, and you think you're going to die, and you think when you dead, that's it. So it gives you this sense of urgency, it creates emotions, it creates this more intense learning environment, because everything's more severe and urgent, because you don't think you're this eternal soul. Now you just think you're this physical body. So and you have to have a physical body to enter into this world, right? It's like you have to have a submarine to go down in the sea, right? So this is like the submarine for your soul. So your soul comes in, enters into a physical body, and you get to play this game that we call life on Earth. And then your soul, when it's done with that life, it kind of recycles back up, and you just go and go again, and that's what reincarnation is. And the more you do that, you're building this like file in the database, in the Akashic record. This file's you, and it's all of your incarnations, everything you've ever done, every thought, every feeling, everything, and you're building a personality. So now, even though you were just a partition, a chip off the old block of source, now you're becoming this, kind of a source creator yourself. You're becoming an ascended master, a teacher. You're all of your lifetimes is building this body of work, which is creating this personality, which is creating this defined piece of consciousness. And this seems to be like a training simulator. The reason I call it a simulator is not a simulation. Simulation kind of implies that you're an NPC, that you're in someone else's game kind of a thing. But this is different. Free will is at the center of my simulator theory, because it's our free will decisions that we make that builds our personality and our character. And that this is a learning simulator for consciousness. So the same way a pilot uses a flight simulator to become a better pilot by, putting himself in situations and doing challenging things, knowing that it won't hurt him on the other side, but he still takes it seriously because it's learning things. He's like, well, one day I will be flying and maybe in those situations, so I want to make sure that, I take this seriously. So he uses a, learning simulator to become a better pilot on the other side. I think that our consciousness, our non-physical consciousness, uses this physical training simulator to grow and evolve as a consciousness, because it puts itself in these situations where it has to make tough decisions, and it's, has to really learn who it is, and, dig deep inside and do all the things that you have to do on Earth, navigate this crazy emotional roller coaster that we're on here. This builds character, and that's stuff that you can't get in the astral, you can't get in the spirit world, because you don't have the same severity that we have here in this physical life. So that's the simulator theory, is that, you hear people all the time say this is a simulation. Well, it's a simulation, the fact that it's not the real world, it is this almost like dream-like state with rules. I really think that this world, the dream world, the astral are all the same. They're all made of the same stuff. It's just there's rule sets that define this simulator and tell us what we can and can't do and put limitations stuff on, because this is a very specific place and it has a specific purpose, and it's to grow and evolve our consciousness on the other side. And that's what the conclusion I came to from all my experiences and everything that I did. So that was big for me, because now I went from this dark night of the soul period where I'm hopeless and helpless and, what's the point of life? Why are we here? And all this stuff, to thinking, okay, I have purpose now. I have, there's a higher self, the collective of all my lives and everything is watching me. And there's bigger ramifications for my actions than just in this physical world. There's a much bigger, greater universe out there that's connected to this, but it's much bigger. So now I have something to work for. I have hope, and I have a reason for being here. Those are all things I was searching for, but I didn't think I was going to find. So this wasn't like hopeful thinking, because I'd already got to the point where hope was gone. I was like, there's no hope, So this was all stuff that happened where it was basically like my consciousness waking me up saying, hey, you're looking at this all wrong. So that was a big deal. And then what it also did, after I created my simulator theory to kind of model this reality and make sense of it all, it made me realize, okay, so remember, going back to my 3 big questions: who are we, where are we, and why are we? So back to the who are we, the main one, the most important one. Who are we? This is what led to my creation of SoulSync, which is my coursework that guides you through fusing these 2 parts of you. I came to this conclusion: we are 2 things. We are a non-physical consciousness that enters into a physical avatar. Remember, by nature, probably 99% of the universe, this is according to Robert Temple in his book, The New Science of Heaven, which is amazing, gets into plasma. So the whole universe is plasma. 99% of the universe is non-physical, meaning almost everything is non-physical. Physical matter is extremely rare. So most intelligences that you meet are non-physical. All the intelligence I was meeting, all the non-human intelligences I was meeting doing hemi-sync and all stuff, are non-physical. It's not like I'm meeting aliens on other planets. These are non-physical energies, entities that are ancient. And then we're like this fishbowl, and they kind of come around us and look at us. They're like, who are these? What is going on here? Because we're a new node of self-exploration in the universe. This is an evolution. So this physical world that we're in is new. So these non-physical consciousnesses enter into this physical world via a physical body. This is the vehicle. It's like renting a car to go drive around. So we're 2 things. We're the non-physical consciousness, and we're the physical body. But depending on when, where you're born, and a few other factors, your physical body has particular skill sets, attributes, behaviors, things that makes it, okay? So human design can reveal a lot of this, astrology can reveal a lot of this. So your body is an autonomous, biological, advanced computer of sorts, or robot of sorts, machine, let's say, that you enter into. So depending on, like I said, when you're born, where you're born, a few other factors, it's going to have its own things, wants, needs, desires, things that it needs to do and things that it needs to survive and thrive, different foods it needs to eat, different places it needs to live. It's going to be built in with different skill sets and things that it can do as jobs and different behavioral patterns. And maybe it needs light, maybe it doesn't need light, maybe it needs to wake up early, maybe it doesn't, maybe it needs to eat a certain diet, maybe it needs to eat this. There's different things that your body needs. Some bodies are made for peopling, some aren't. Some are made to be leaders, some are made to be workers. There's all these things that you'll find out about the body, because the body is complex. The body is also autonomous. Even without the soul coming into the body, it can still function. It can still start a family, have a job, do all those things, because it's built in to the machine. These are the things it needs. But then your consciousness comes into it to drive it around. And your consciousness comes into this life with its own wants, needs, desires, its own to-do list. Before this incarnation, you meet with your soul family and your guides, and you plan out this next sojourn of, okay, here's what I need to accomplish. I need to meet so-and-so at this place. I need to heal this karmic wound. I need to, level up this part of my personality. There's certain things that you come here to do. So you see that you're kind of like two roommates coming into one house. Now, just like any roommate scenario, if the roommates aren't getting along, well, you have problems. That's why a lot of people don't feel comfortable in their own bodies, is because it's like fighting roommates. Because if your body needs certain things, or needs to live in a certain place, or needs to behave certain ways, but your consciousness is kind of overriding that, saying, no, let's go here, let's do this, whatever, then they're going to be at odds. And that's when you have dis-ease, that's when you have depression, anxiety, this feeling of uncomfortableness in your own vessel. So what SoulSync does is it helps to bridge this. It helps to audit the two sides. This is this course that I created, where you audit your physical body and you audit your spiritual body. You connect to your higher self and use it as like a chat GPT for the soul, and get your to-do list, your missions for this earth life. And then you also figure out what your physical body needs and wants and desires and is supposed to be doing. Because you can have two different things. Like, I work with a lot of people that'll be like, I've been a very accomplished blank. I've been a successful business person. I have a family. I have all these things. I have a job. I have a, whatever. I have money. But something's missing. There's a hole inside of me. There's something telling me I'm not doing something I'm supposed to be doing. That's because you're two things. So you might be accomplishing your physical traits or wants and desires and to-do list, but maybe your spiritual side isn't being acknowledged, or vice versa, or a little bit of both. So that's why we audit both. I have these worksheets and meditations and different visualizations, different things that I've developed over the years that help you really connect to your physical and to your spiritual side, your consciousness. And like I said, you audit it, you figure all these things out, you integrate them together, you bring harmony into your house, and you find out your true purpose. Because sometimes you have multiple purposes. You'll have your physical purpose and your spiritual purpose. And then we fuse those together. That's why I call it SoulSync, or synchronizing those two parts of your soul together so that you can make the most of this sojourn and just have fun. You want to feel comfortable in your house. You want to get along with your roommates, right? But first step is realizing that you are two things. You are the physical and the non-physical combined into one. That's what this life is. So that's how I basically got to my simulator theory and how I got to creating SoulSync. It was profound for me. It changed my life, and then I just decided to offer it to other people because we're all the same. We're all made of the same two parts. So after that, a few other things happened just this year. The synchronicities have been wild through this journey, and I find myself with Sarah in the high desert of Southern California at a place called the Integratron. And so at this point, I have a model of reality, of what we're here to do. This is a training simulator, right? And, we're supposed to be growing and evolving our soul, creating an individualized, personality, soul, while also vicariously feeding that information back up to Source so Source can grow and evolve through us too, right? But knowing that this is a simulator and that something or someone created it, designed it, and that it is made for development purposes, like a game. Well, think about any good game. There's going to be your main objective, like say you're playing Mario. You can just run through, hop on the flagpole, slide down, say, yay, I did it. Or you can take your time and look around and find secret stuff, hidden stuff, and you get power-ups, you get clues. Maybe this takes you to this other world that you didn't even know existed if you just blow through the game. So then I started thinking about things that way. Like, okay, there's probably layers to this game. It's a very complex world, very brilliantly designed, and designed with an intention. So it would make sense if there was, you have all these avatars in here, these consciousnesses. It's like a school, right? It's a learning simulator. So what if there's things embedded into this world that are like IQ tests of sorts, that are games on top of the games, like mini games? And then I end up at the Integratron. The Integratron is this amazing place. It's in Landers, California. They call it Landers, California because of all the UFO landings. It's right outside of Joshua Tree. We end up there at the Integratron doing a sound bath and this sonic healing with Eric Rankin, who you've probably seen on Ancient Aliens and all sorts of stuff. He's amazing. And it's the first time they'd ever done anything like this, and we're at it. And I'm like, how did we get here? We're in the middle of nowhere, middle of the desert, at this wild building that evidently was built by George Van Tassel through these, Venetian aliens, right? And it's so cool. Life-changing experience. But we're in the bottom of the Integratron getting this personal presentation from Eric Rankin about sonic geometry and how you can take sacred geometry, convert it into sound and tones, and those sounds and tones unlock things within you. And this is all feeding right back into what I've been doing with hemi-sync and using tones and sound to, activate you at different levels and unlock different things. But then he goes into something called the escape room theory I'd never heard before. And I was already going this way with all of my research. And the escape room theory is just that there's these clues embedded all throughout Earth, and that Earth is more like an escape room where you're supposed to put this clue together with this clue, it unlocks another one, and keep going. And that there is an escape of sorts, right? And his presentation was amazing and mind-blowing, and it really made me think, okay, so what are we escaping, right? Because in my model, you don't physically escape out of the simulator because the universe isn't really set up that way. Space isn't what we've been taught. Let's just say that. So I'm like, okay, what are we escaping? And I started thinking, okay, I think we're escaping spiritually. It's ascending. And this goes back to what Ishak Bentov talks about, the importance of Kundalini and how everything has to have this initiation process, and how, that's basically, I look at it like you're in a house, you're born in a house that's basically all the lights are off. And you have to go through and flip all the light switches on, which is activating all your centers. And that's what Kundalini does. It just, like a serpent unwinding inside of you, it activates all of your energy centers going up and blast out through the top. And that's what a Kundalini awakening is. I feel like that's what happened to me. And I feel like near-death experiences, UFO encounters, those kinds of things are really, what really activate that and unleash it instantly instead of in a slow process. I think it's probably better to do it slowly, but sometimes your higher self intervenes because it's like, all right, you're not doing it yourself, so boom, we're going to make it happen. So anyways, I'm learning all this stuff, the Integratron, about the escape room theory and everything, and it really meshes well with my simulator theory. It gives it like the higher level of difficulty if you want to play the game on hard. You not only have to do all your karmic work, you not only have to support your vessel, you not only have to survive this wild world, but now there's these mini games built on top of it. You have to go find these clues, and you have to decipher these clues, and this one leads to this one, and eventually you can unlock and ascend. So that's where my mindset is. And then next, it just gets crazier. I get this invitation out of nowhere to go to the Monroe Institute. Okay, this is a place I've always wanted to go. This is where my journey began with Robert Monroe and hemi-sync. And I get an email, and it says, Jordan, we would love to pay for you to come up here for free and experience the Monroe Institute. Go through a week-long gateway voyage journey, and we're gonna do this special, they were calling it a creators gateway for creators. At this point, I'd been doing TikTok videos just talking about all the stuff I'm learning, and it went kind of crazy. I have 40 something million views, but just doing daily videos, walk and talks. My wife actually challenged me, Sarah. She said, why don't you just do like a video a day for 30 days, see what happens? And I did that, and I had like several viral videos in that first month. So, okay, so people actually want to hear this stuff, right? So that caught the attention of them, and they, invited me up there, which was nuts, because this is a place I've been dreaming about going, but I didn't really, I don't know, I just didn't go. I didn't make it a priority, even though I should have. And then, of course, higher self intervenes and says, if you're not going to do it on your own, we're just going to, boop, there you go. So next thing you know, I'm flying up to Virginia, and I still don't really believe it's real. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get off the plane, and that guy that's supposed to be holding the placard that says Jordan isn't going to be there, and I'm like, oh, that was some big trick, because it just didn't seem real. But no, he's there, holding the sign, Jordan. So I go to the Gateway, go to the Monroe Institute, most amazing experience of my life. We have like so many paranormal experiences, you can't even count them all. It's just a wild place. So how I talked about we're in this like fishbowl, physical fishbowl, and this non-physical reality. The way it works there, I come to find out, is that since when you're there and you're doing the hemi-sync, your level of consciousness raises. So instead of let's say the ETs, for lack of a better word, but the intelligences out there outside of the fishbowl, they can't get down into our density very easily. But we at the Monroe Institute go up. We're rising through the density levels. So they come there as like an observation point to study us and to watch us, because it's interesting, because instead of them having to come down in here, we go up there. Kind of like, say you're in a boat on the top of the water, instead of diving down, what if the fish and everything just came up to the boat? You would go to that part of the ocean and study them. Well, that's what the Monroe Institute is. So we had all sorts of crazy encounters there, and it changed a lot of parts of my life permanently. I'd already been doing hemi-sync for years, but I wasn't doing it right. This made me do it right. And then I learned remote viewing with Joe Monaco, and that changed my life because I nailed the remote viewing target on the first try, and that really, widened my aperture even more of my perception of reality, because here I am just given coordinates on a thing, doing a meditation, and I see what's at that coordinate. I don't know how to read coordinates, and it's wild. I'll do a whole nother video on that. But so then I'm realizing, okay, I call it activated versus augmented. Like, we have all these natural embedded abilities within us to do all these amazing things. There's people out there doing, like, say, Neuralink and these kinds of things where they want to embed stuff into us to make us superhuman. But we are superhuman. That's what this whole thing has taught me, is that when you activate yourself, when you do things like SoulSync, and you actually figure out who you are, what your body needs, you give it what it needs, you activate all your energy centers through safe Kundalini practices, and you do everything you're supposed to do at a human level, you can become an activated superhuman, because we have these embedded psychic abilities that everyone does that will blow your mind. You don't need hemi-sync, you don't need AI, you don't need chips implanted in you, you don't need any of this stuff. You can do so much. And then this really completed everything, because I had just learned about escape room theory and how we're trying to escape, but then I was like, escape what? We're not supposed to escape physically, like get on a spaceship and fly out of here. It's a spiritual, energetic escape. It's the Kundalini, it's the blasting through. And the Monroe Institute, there I was able to learn so many advanced, like Jedi style powers and abilities that doesn't make me special. Everyone has it. And it made me realize that's what all this is like we're evolving our consciousness on one hand, while also evolving the human body, because the human body is the vehicle for consciousness in this physical world. So all these things we're doing, we're leveling up everything, our consciousness, our spirituality, and the physical world, the human body, because this is important, because we're going to come back in our next sojourn, our next incarnation, and we want these bodies to be the next model, the next evolution. Everything's constantly evolving. So it really made me realize, okay, that's what we're doing here. We're evolving the human body while evolving our consciousness at the same time. The consciousness part is very, very important because that's eternal, but the human body is very important because we use this as a vehicle to, evolve our consciousness. So they work hand in hand. So I say activated versus augmented, because the augmented route, I see that being, you could see it as the next level up, the next step, because it's coming, but I think that we need to be at a higher state consciously and physically before we even do that, because I can just see that going bad when you start studying aliens, right? 80% of all alien sightings on Earth are either Nordics or Greys. And when I look at Nordics and Greys, I think of activated versus augmented. I think about the bifurcated path of humans as, say augmented would be the Nordics, these Arcturian, Pleiadian type people that are tall, beautiful hair, piercing eyes, that kind of stuff, perfect bodies, speak telepathically, seem in control and confident and spiritual by nature. That's the activated path. I look at that, when I see that, as the human potential. When you see the Greys, I look at that as augmented gone wrong. They basically severed their source to connection. They've turned themselves into these like biological, synthetic robot things, and they're struggling to get back to having a soul. That's what I see. So that's my augmented first activated path. And I don't think these are aliens. I think these are different paths of humans. And I use that as a cautionary tale, and that's what drives me is, trying to become a fully activated human, and because that's important, but then also using this escape room theory just to make the simulator more fun and go through and find all the clues. And it's an IQ test. It's fun. It's exciting. It's a choose your own adventure thing, right? Also understanding that we're supposed to be ultimately, growing and evolving and leveling up our consciousness, because that's the eternal aspect that lives forever. So that's my journey. That's where I'm at right now. And it's always evolving as well. So that's just to kind of give you a brief backstory of me, how I got to this point, how I came to my simulator theory and my SoulSync course. And that's it. I know that was a lot. So anyways, let me know what you guys think about all this. I love reading your comments and everything, and share this with anyone you think would be interested. And like I said, this is just episode 1. I look forward to doing many more of these. So I appreciate you being here. Have a beautiful day. Peace.